back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dogcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams with me on this Tuesday afternoon, and the Georgia Bulldogs finally have their quarterfinals opponent. Georgia, number 3 Bulldogs, will be taking on number 6 Ole Miss January 1st, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central Time down in New Orleans. We're going to spend a lot of this episode talking about that matchup, share some of our thoughts from Ole Miss's 41-10 win over Tulane back on Saturday. Talk about what Kirby Smart had to say about playing the Rebels, what the last few weeks have been like, the injury situation for Georgia. Talk about a big move with Will Muschamp leaving Georgia and headed to Texas to be the defensive coordinator. And we'll finish things off with a little Georgia basketball. But Kipp, before we do that, we are recording this on December 23rd, which is Kirby Smart's 50th birthday. Happy birthday to Coach Smart. I did a story for the occasion, 50 stats that stand out about Kirby's time so far at Georgia. I was going to put you on the spot. Any of those stats catch your attention? Any you want to shout out on the podcast?
Well, I mean, for one, kudos to you on this article. Like, this is an outstanding read, and it is actually incredible to see everything Kirby Smart's accomplished during his time at Georgia. I wanted to start by saying, like, it's incredible to see what he's done like so quickly, but then I realized, yeah, it hasn't been that short amount of time. We're talking about a decade here. But I think, yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me is just the fact that he has led Georgia to a 9-game winning streak against Auburn, Georgia Tech, and Tennessee. Like, those are, I mean, 3 of Georgia's biggest rivals. Good luck getting Kirby Smart to rank those rivalries. He will just start telling you about a bunch of other rivalries that are important. Probably Florida as well. But, like, you can't argue that those are 3 of Georgia's 5 biggest rivalries, 5 or 6. And, yeah, Georgia now owns those series. Like, they're like people who have gone to Georgia and gotten, their master's degree, that are doctors now that have never lost to Auburn, Georgia Tech, and Tennessee. Like, that's just an incredible stat. It's one of many that are in Jordan's article. I definitely recommend everyone going and reading that, because like every one of these stats I could have pulled from, and a lot of those you would have probably forgotten about. The fact that he's only lost to 3 teams with a losing record, the very next stat in that article. I don't want to give them all away, but I do think that, like, those are just really impressive numbers, part of one of the greatest coaching runs, of this century.
It's been unreal, and like you said, Kip, I don't want to give them all away. The one that I like kind of gravitate to, I'll put them in pairs. One, Georgia has beaten 43 different teams in the time that Curry's been the head coach. But as it stands right now, he's won the most recent meeting against every team they've played except for Notre Dame, which because, the Sugar Bowl last year, because I mean, as good as there's been, in 21 and 22 and them winning those national titles, they're still right there. And obviously getting that rematch win over Alabama in the SEC title game kind of helped with that stat. But I do hope if you're listening, go check that out. It was fun to work on. There was a lot of number crunching and double and triple checking my math, because math's not necessarily my strong suit, but I think we got it to work out. Well, speaking of a rematch, Kip, we are getting ready for one on New Year's Day. Georgia will be taking on Ole Miss after they had played back on October 18th. And the way the schedule set up really gave us an opportunity to kind of scout ahead. We got to watch Ole Miss and Tulane. The winner of that, we already knew, would be playing Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. I just wanted your thoughts from that win for Ole Miss. 41-10 over Tulane. Not really a very close game at any point. Tulane had their moments, but looking at Ole Miss, they forced 3 turnovers that kind of helped them pull away. What were your general thoughts from how Ole Miss played in that game and just what Georgia's going to be up against?
Yeah, it looked pretty similar to the Ole Miss team we saw during the season, and I guess that makes sense. It's basically most of the coaching staff, and a lot of debate on, I guess, who really calls the plays for Ole Miss this season. I thought Charlie Weiss Jr. did a pretty good job out there. And we're looking for coaching tendencies. That's kind of what we're trying to figure out, looking at this matchup. Like, what does Ole Miss look like? And I think they still went for it twice on 4th down. That was kind of the one thing I'm like, all right, unless they're inside their own 40, they're probably going to go for it. And that kind of bore true. They were able to convert both times. Now, again, like you said, this is against Tulane. The math might not be the same. The statistics, the analytics might say different things against Georgia. But overall, it still looked like an offense it's really tough to defend. Trinidad Chamo still looked like a complete nightmare out there for defenders. And then I guess when he got banged up, Austin Simmons reminded me, yeah, he's still a little bit turnover prone out there. And you kind of see why. Like, where would Ole Miss be if they hadn't found Trinidad Chamos? I mean, we're going to hear it nonstop over the next week or two, just about the fact that they were his journey to Ole Miss. We've already kind of heard it from the time Georgia played them earlier this season. But I mean, just incredible storyline and a maybe like perfect quarterback for this system. So that is still going to be the key going into this story. This matchup. This still looks like an offense that is going to really test whether Georgia's defense is improved.
We're going to find that out, and we'll talk about injuries a little bit later on in this episode, but that is going to be a piece of the puzzle that has to be considered, because I agree. I think this Georgia defense has taken strides since they played back in mid-October. A couple of the things I wanted to hit on from Ole Miss win over Tulane. I mean, the biggest question right now is Kewan Lacey. Banged up, left the game, winds up coming back in and looked like, aggravated the injury, which that was one of those decisions. I don't know that Pete Golden is thrilled that they decided to put him back in that game. The latest quotes I've seen from Pete Golden was like that they're still kind of working through. I don't know that he said Lacey specifically, but a few of the guys that got banged up, Trinidad Chambliss had to fight through injury during that game as well. The Ole Miss defense was kind of hit and miss. They gave up some plays against that Tulane offense, 421 yards. They did create 3 turnovers, which is important. But they were okay on third down. Tulane was 5 of 13. One of the numbers, just looking at the stats, that really pops out to me: Ole Miss 3 of 10 on third down as an offense like that. If you're Georgia, you got to be licking your chops looking at that. On the whole, this was a weekend of first round games that for the most part really didn't deliver. Even the marquee games, I'd say Alabama Oklahoma was the best of the games, but Texas A&M Miami, albeit the wind had a lot to do with that. That was a terrible game. Ole Miss took control of this one pretty early on, and then Oregon took care of James Madison. Though there sounds like there was some late heroics, I guess, on one side, or whatever you call it, for the cover. Which is what a lot of people were certainly interested in. Anything else from that first weekend you want to hit on? While understand we've really focused on Ole Miss because that's who Georgia's got next.
Yeah, I don't think that the argument got weakened at all. That probably the Power Four conferences are going to go back to the table and say, "Hey, did you watch those games? They weren't exactly competitive, at least." A couple of them were. I'm not going to say which ones, but maybe let's change the rules here. And it's tough to argue for and against this. Like you don't want to take away from what these teams work so hard for. And there's so many changes going on in college football to where it's like, is this still going to be a recognizable sport? But at the same time, like, they're going this direction anyway. So I just feel like that was a very strong indicator that college football is probably going to end up ultimately separating the Power Four and the G5 conferences. Like they might need their own postseason playoff, because if the best teams from those conferences aren't able to field a competitive matchup in the first round, then there's not a strong argument that they deserve an automatic, spot, especially 2 in the college football playoff.
I hate to say it, but I agree with you just because I'm someone who genuinely loves all the FBS teams. I like seeing the group of five try to get their shot, but we're at a stage with college football that the haves and the have-nots, I don't think I've ever been so farther on, each side of the spectrum. And I think, when you consider revenue sharing and what a team like Georgia gets to operate with compared to what a team like James Madison gets to operate with, I mean, there is no comparison. There's part of me that would like them to say, okay, we can have one group of five team in, but you have to hit. I think this was Bud Elliott who pointed this out, our buddy in the 247 Sports Network. You've got to hit this metric. You've got to be ranked in the top 20 of the college football playoff rankings and win your conference, things like that. But I say that also understanding the committee's going to be aware of that metric, and you can't be shocked if it's like, oh man, Tulane, you were 21, you were so close to hitting that metric. Oh well, you know what I mean? Like they would find a way to work their way around it. So I do genuinely hate that. I would like to see all the teams at the FBS level represented, but I'm with you, Kip. I think it's inevitable. And I think when you consider the ESPN part of this, they're going to look at these ratings and say, look, we left a lot of money on the table by putting James Madison and putting Tulane in this game. Well, let's work around this because there's more money to be made with this playoff.
I mean, yeah, because look at the main team arguing they should have been there. How much money was left down there by not having Notre Dame in this playoff, and it's hard to argue. I mean, it is. I mean, at the end of the day, Notre Dame got itself left out by losing to the two teams that went ahead of it, and that's you can't argue against that. But at the same time, like we've just watched Georgia have a completely different performance in a rematch over Alabama. So you can't sit here and say that Notre Dame couldn't, field a much more competitive team in the playoff, but also like that they weren't on equal ground with some of these other teams in the first round. I just think that at the end of the day, yes, they lost to both those teams, but at the same time, they would probably have blown out either of these group of five teams as well. And we can have the debate on, do you want the best football teams or the teams that earned it? I think you got to find that middle ground. And I think still Notre Dame would have been a more competitive matchup. And then, yeah, continue that argument. Like, how would Vanderbilt have fared? I don't know. I think they keep having to tweak the system. I don't think this is one of the, the worst decisions that could be made. But I also know once you go that path, I mean, there's probably no turning back. Like this is just going to change dozens of football teams forever. So how do you do that? Whether you give them their own playoff or whether we're just splitting into a completely different faction, those are decisions that we should probably be worried about the decision makers being involved in that, because as of right now, those decision makers they don't have a great win streak as of late.
No, totally agree. And like you said, that's one of those things you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube if that's the route they take. Well, let's talk a little bit about what Kirby Smart had to say on Monday. Had an opportunity to talk to him for about 15 minutes now that Georgia understands that we'll be playing Ole Miss. I want to go through some of the injury updates. He acknowledged that Gabe Harris has a turf toe. I reported over on our site on Tuesday. Doesn't sound great as far as his availability, so that is going to be something to pay attention to. Also, Kirby said that Jonel Aguero, who's been dealing with a wrist injury, he's been with the team. He's been trying to get his way back. It sounds like things are trending in the right direction as far as the injury goes. He was asked about Colby Young and Drew Bobo, and a lot of folks on the board, Kip, kind of reacted to it, thinking like, oh, there's an opportunity here. Well, Kirby was really talking much more in generalities about injured guys and getting them back. Drew Bobo's not going to play again during this season. Colby Young's got an opportunity. I still think that the semifinal, if Georgia were to make it that far, is really going to be the realistic opportunity to get him back. So, we've dealt with Kirby enough to know you have to understand how to kind of read through what he's saying, and a lot of the time how you word your question is going to define how he responds to it. But wanted to play some clips of Kirby from Monday, and he was asked about what looked different with Ole Miss. Again, Lane Kiffin no longer there. You mentioned Charlie Weiss Jr. sticking around. There's some other assistants too that have stuck around for this playoff run. Did Kirby see anything that looked really different in Ole Miss? Is what he had to say.
The offensive coordinator and the staff is still all there. Like, so, I mean, they're not going to make overhaul or make large changes, right? They got something that really works well. They got a really high-powered, explosive, great wideouts, really good tight end, one of the best backs in the country, arguably the quarterback that may be playing the best in the country in terms of his ability to make throws in all areas. I mean, the guy's elite. He was elite last time we played him. He's just as elite or more elite now because he's gotten more experience and more confidence. So they're playing at a really high level offensively, and I mean, Lane has something to do with that because he helped build it and get them there. But Charlie's done a tremendous job calling the plays and doing those things.
I think that, like we were just saying, sometimes with Kirby, you have to kind of read between the lines. But for me, Kip, looking at this, it feels a lot like the conversation we had with Alabama, where he's like, well, he's asked, what looks different? And it's like, well, there's not going to be that much that's changed because you are who you are at this point. Now, the element of Lane Kiffin being gone matters a lot. But, Kip, I think he's being honest when he says there's not a lot that has changed, even with Lane no longer there.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, like personnel is what we're talking about. Like they're the same. Like you still have the same guys. You still have a quarterback that you couldn't stop for 3 quarters. And I think that's really what Kirby's saying. Like, listen, like he's still there, and their play caller's still there. You could still see Lane Kiffin's fingerprints throughout the program. The way that they're approaching both sides of the ball. He's not on the sideline, so you can't sit here and try to figure out what impact the difference in in-game adjustments are going to be. That's just an X factor. Like you watched one game with Pete Golding, but you don't know the impact that's going to make. It didn't. I mean, especially you watched him against Tulane. We just ended talking about how it wasn't really a competitive game, so you didn't learn a ton from that either. So there's definitely a different feel with this rematch versus Alabama because of the coaching change. I think the bigger impact is how Georgia's changed since they played Ole Miss. That's probably a bigger impact for me than even the departure of Lane Kiffin. So I think and injuries, which guys will or will not be on the field. I think those are just bigger factors to me than the changes between the two teams. And at the end of the day, like Kirby Smart's been pretty good in rematches.
Yeah, one of the stats that I included in that 50 stat story, he is 4-0 when playing a team for the second time. He's trying to get to 5-0 when they play Ole Miss. The thing I was going to say with the Lane Kiffin of it all, Kip, I'm really a believer. I'm not saying if Lane had stayed and there was no coaching controversy and the carousel part of this that that Ole Miss would be worse off. But I do really believe that there's something to this Ole Miss team that these players especially have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And the story for the last month of the regular season was Lane Kiffin's leaving. And there was the uncertainty, and Lane didn't help because he kept playing into it. But I do think that there is part of this team that wants to prove, look, Lane Kiffin was not the only thing working here. I've said this in the last few weeks when we understood, it was more than likely going to be Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin wasn't the one throwing those touchdowns. That was Trinidad Chambliss. Lane Kiffin wasn't the one making all these tackles. And I think you stay with the interim with Pete Golding. You get everybody to rally around him and to try to prove that they're still legit. I don't know how you feel, Kip, but I think that there's something to it where this is a really big motivating factor for Ole Miss. And I don't look at it as, well, Lane Kiffin's not there anymore, and that fact is overall just a huge negative for the Rebels.
I think it just provides focus for the players and the coaching staff. It's over. Like it was an Egg Bowl distraction for sure. I mean, that was all everyone was talking about in college football that week when it wasn't, there were a lot of big games going on, but it was just talking about Lane Kiffin's departure. It's happened. They have clarity now, and I think it's probably a renewed focus. I'm still not sure how well Pete Golding's going to do as Ole Miss's head coach, but in this specific situation, you have everything that Lane Kiffin has built without the distraction that Lane Kiffin causes. And so I do think there's upside in that, specifically for this game, in that I think these players, for the most part, are going to be just, like you said, motivated to prove that they can play for any coach, rallying behind the coach that stayed and thought it was worth coaching them. And like I said, there haven't really been any coaching changes. You got the same familiar guys building your game plan, and I don't think he's going to go in there and just try to completely do something different now. Off season, sure, he'll put his fingerprint on it. Right now, he's trying to get them to play within what they've been working on all off season and all season. So I think that there are some positives to that. Whether or not they have maybe some DMs and phone calls from Baton Rouge telling them, hey, you have a spot here. Maybe the transfer portal's calling for a lot of guys and distracting some guys. That might be possible. And with the transfer portal and with guys, worried about being injured, that still could be a question mark in this game. If Georgia maybe gets up to an early lead, the guys just start thinking about, okay, I need to take care of myself. I have eligibility. I have, NIL opportunities calling my way. That is just a new factor that could happen in games like this, to where maybe you don't see that same effort level to come back from deficits. But that's a specific situation. If you get to there, we'll see what happens. But I think overall, this is just the same dangerous Ole Miss team that has really pushed Georgia the last couple of seasons.
I wanted to read this quote. You mentioned focus. Dan Woken from Yahoo Sports had this from Pete Golding. Trying to organize the team upon, with Lane leaving. I'll clean it up just a tad. Quote, "It would be one thing, no disrespect, if this was the Pop-Tart Bowl or something like that. That crap would have been really hard, but this is the playoffs." And he did. He said he'd clean up his swearing a little bit after that. But no, I think there's something to that, and I think this team is motivated. Now, looking at it from the Georgia side, they'll have about 25, 26 days of rest since the SEC title game. And Kirby was asked about that, how you kind of measure the value in the rest and trying to make the most of that time. That's what Kirby had to say.
I think it's been good. You have to make it a positive by how you handle it. The positive is the mental practice you get, the recovery you get, the extra lifts you get. The negative is, when you're playing good football, a lot of times you want to keep playing. You want to stay in rhythm. You want to stay in a weekly schedule, and that schedule gets thrown off by the break because we had players taking final exams. We gave the players time off in terms of before they came back. And it really started grinding. So, you do the best you can with the calendar you have. You try to talk to other people and find out what the best way to do things is. But I'm excited about where our team is. I'm excited that they're practicing the way they are, and they're excited about the opponent because they have so much respect for the team we have to play.
I don't know how you feel about this, Kipp, but I think the biggest thing to me when it comes to the break is just a chance for guys to get re-energized and to try to get healthy. Like we already hit on, this is not a completely healthy team. We're still talking about a team without their starting center, probably without one of their top receivers once again in Colby Young. But I think about a guy like Gunnar Stockton, and I've said this in the last few podcasts that I don't think I really put enough to his play against Georgia Tech and Alabama, and the fact that he's probably not close to 100%, or he at least was not in those games. I think when you have a chance to just try to get healthy over the course of December, that to me is the most valuable thing when you consider the time they've had to work with and trying to maximize the schedule before they get back on the field.
Yeah, I mean, he spent 3 months in a row just taking shots. I mean, and legit shots. Like, we never really saw like Gunnar Stockton just having a guy go by the wayside. Like all of his hits were direct. He looked like a linebacker out there. So yeah, for him to get a little bit less purple over the last couple of weeks is probably something that he's not too upset about. I think that first run in the Sugar Bowl, it'll be interesting. Just him, taking a hit for the first time in several weeks, and how he reacts to that, and probably. I mean, knowing Gunner, he probably misses it. He's probably going to be smiling and going, "Okay, there it is again." But for Gunner, for Georgia's receivers that are trying to get back to the field. I mean, we talked about Colby Young. He's trying, and I think it just says a lot about, he was on that knee cart, and we saw him before every game. He would be, making sure to high five and greet every player coming out, waiting for every player to leave. The guy's working his tail off to try to get back on the field. And I think that's an example for his position room. You got Talon Taylor, a guy who still has been thinking about that play against Alabama in the first game where he misses that pass and he gets banged up, hasn't been able to get back on the field and make an impact. He's a guy that can help Georgia out a lot. Ethan Barbour, freshman, getting a lot of snaps at tight end. He's probably going to be a full go in this game. That tight end room is ridiculous right now. But I think, him coming back is a huge thing as well. And, then you have other wide receivers that are trying to get back to the field, like Noah Thomas. He was banged up as well. So I just think that for Georgia, that's a big aspect of just trying to, regain their focus and get their pass catchers back. I think that'll help out Gunner a lot.
I think so too, and I think it's a situation when I look at Georgia, and again, Kirby talked about it after the SEC title game where it was like, look, I mean, we just made it through this season, and we're adding another SEC game next year. Just the toll that takes. So I think there's a lot of value in that. I'm glad you mentioned Ethan Barbour because he's a guy, when he got hurt in week 2, I mean, I was pretty convinced, all right, that's it. He is not coming back. He looks like he's got a real shot to be able to play now. What his role will be, it's hard to say. But just to have him available would be really big. And then Colby Young, you mentioned, he traveled to like Starkville when it was obvious he wasn't going to play. We saw him in before several games, throwing the ball with Andrew Smart and just hanging out with the team. I mean, he's still been very much a part of this team. And I think he should be commended for that because I would imagine, when he got hurt, I was like, well, more than likely my season's over. But he's been working really hard, and we'll see if he's able to come back by the time we get to the Sugar Bowl. A couple other things I wanted to play from Kirby. Really just one other clip, though, I wanted to share. He was asked about, this is basically running it back for Georgia compared to last year. They played in this exact same game. They played Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Now, there was a lot going on around that game. The terrorist attack moves the game from January 1st to January 2nd. But if Georgia would change anything with its preparation, with how it went about getting ready for the game, and Kirby made it clear, and I'm paraphrasing, that, the preparation's not why they lost that game. Fumbling the ball right before halftime and Notre Dame being able to score. A bad middle eight, which also included the kick return to start that second half, that third quarter, that really had a lot to do with the issue. And that had a lot to do with why Georgia lost the game. It really didn't have anything to do with preparation. And I totally agree with that. I don't think, when you consider everything else going on around the team, with that attack, with Sonny Smart, him getting hurt, and then him winding up in the hospital and ultimately passing away. There's a lot going on, but I think Georgia still had the opportunities in that game to win the game. I don't think the preparation had anything to do with it. You turn the ball over, you give up the kick return touchdown. I think Georgia's last 3 drives of that game against Notre Dame, they had turnovers on downs. Like it was all there for Georgia, and they just could not capitalize. Did want to play this clip of Kirby talking about what so much of college football is focused on right now, especially the teams that are not in the playoff, and that's the transfer portal. And Kirby was asked, have you met with players? Have you guys sort of figured out what's going to happen with these guys who may eventually wind up in the transfer portal? That's what Kirby had to say.
No, I hadn't. I mean, we're focused on this team. I think it would be, remiss to say that we're focused on roster management. We're not focused on it. We're focused on, prep and getting better. And for a while, it's been like intrinsically looking at ourselves and asking each player, did you come here to develop? Did you truly come here to develop? Because if you did, all your buddies are out there right now. Everybody's, announcing what they're doing. I'm announcing that I'm going in the portal. I'm announcing that I'm re-signing. How about you announce that you're getting better and you're going to practice and like actually do what the 20 and 30 years of college football players did before you, which was practice in December when they're on good teams and get better. Because if you're going to play somewhere else, you know what you need to do. You need to get better. If you're going to play here, you know what you need to do. You need to get better. If you want to go to the National Football League and play, this is your last chance to get better. Because they're not going to give you much opportunity. They're going to cut you or keep you based on how you do. They don't bring the practice in pads but so many days. So development occurs in December for us, and that's what we've been focused on.
I gotta say, Kip, like an all-time clip from Kirby, and I think it's one of those moments when he was asked the question about roster management, like the wheels started turning, and he was like, "We hold on, folks, because we're about to have a real one." That man, I feel like he really made it clear, Kip, how he feels about the players who are trying to decide their future, and to me, I understand that part of it, but Kirby's focused on the team.
In this era of college football, I think Georgia fans have to say without a doubt that they have. I don't want to say the perfect coach, but the coach who has taken the mantle from Nick Saban to be kind of the mouthpiece of college football and to be the avatar of the fans to remind them like these are the things that are important. There's been so many amazing clips from Kirby Smart the last 6, 9, 12 months of him just saying kind of what college football fans feel, how they feel in general about this sport. And a reminder that people are kind of looking at the players and saying, where's the loyalty? Where's the passion? It's pro football now. And I mean, we are also in year 25 of coaches making $1 million+ a year. We just had our coaching carousel that's still going on. There are a lot of places where I can't even tell you who the head coach is because of a lot of the changes. I need Jordan's big board to remind me of all the ones that have left. So it's regulation that's caused all these issues. And Kirby does a great job of kind of reminding us and putting us back and providing that just the viewpoint of like, these are the things that are supposed to be important. And these are the things that I make sure to instill in my players the best I can to like focus on these things. Like these are the things that you should be focused on and everything else should take care of itself. Seems like it's a tough battle for Kirby Smart to fight. But again, for Georgia fans, like who else would you rather have as your coach? The one saying things like that. I just think that it's refreshing and it's kind of a reminder of how good Georgia's had it for the last decade.
100%. And the thing I wanted to point out, and every time we go into these portal windows, now there's only going to be one window. But I usually have a working list of guys that I think could portal. And most of the time that's not on intel. It's just that, hey, let's look at the depth chart. Who makes sense? Who would move on? And more times than not, Kip, I mean, the list that actually goes in, it's like a quarter of what I like genuinely expected. And I think it's a product of buy-in. It's a product of what these guys have been through. And, Kirby's really preached to guys like, hey, work while you wait. If you're not playing right now, we're still going to develop you. It was a reason, a guy like Julio Humphrey hung around as long as he did. He was going to portal the season before he ultimately wound up leaving. I think there's something to that. And I think that it's why Georgia has continued to thrive in a sport that just looks so significantly different than it did when Kirby was hired in December 2015.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at my transfer article every week and just looking at the different guys that are playing and the fact that they had 6 guys in the college football playoff. Georgia's going to lose double-digit guys every year. I mean, you just lock in 10 because it's different at Georgia. And Kirby says over and over again, Georgia's not for everyone. And a lot of guys, the only way you can find that out is to go there and spend a full season. And that practice probably hit different for a lot of guys. But at the same time, the guys that are there 3 and 4 years, you see these guys that were down the depth chart and all of a sudden, boom, these are guys that are making big time plays for Georgia. It's also why if you don't see these guys making a huge impact, they're highly rated in their first year, maybe don't call them a bust right out the gate. Maybe give them a year. Just look at Ellis Robinson and what he is doing for the Georgia program. There are situations 4 or 5 times out of 10, a guy like Ellis Robinson would hit the portal at a lot of programs because he came in as like the highest rated cornerback the program ever signed, and had to fight to get any playing time in year one. And now it's like you look at Georgia's cornerback group and you're like, they might be set. This is a strong group playing great football. So buy-in is really what Kirby's always been about, and I think that consistency from before the transfer portal era to now has really helped the Georgia program have the culture that they need to really compete for national championships.
Yeah, at this point on December 23rd, we only know of two guys who plan on entering the transfer portal. Cornerback Daniel Harris, probably the guy I would have circled as the most obvious to transfer after he wound up losing his starting job to Ellis Robinson. And then Pierce Spurlin, a guy who had to transfer to continue playing. He had been medically disqualified by Georgia, and he's been able to be cleared. And he's a guy, Pierce Spurlin, you're going to be rooting for just with his story. And, he showed a lot of promise during his time when he was able to play at Georgia. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back, and talk about Coach Boom headed to Austin, and then we'll finish things out with a little Georgia basketball. All right, Kip, big news last Thursday with Will Muschamp announcing that he is returning to full-time coaching and he's headed to Texas, a place he knows well. Will Muschamp was the defensive coordinator at Texas from 2008 to 2010. Steve Sarkisian talked, I believe, the next day about the hire. Basically, again, I'm paraphrasing, said that Will Muschamp would be the head coach of the defense. It would allow Steve to focus a little bit more on the offense. Before we get into what Kirby had to say, just what was your reaction, Kipp? Because I'll just say at the top, I was shocked. I did not expect Will Muschamp to go back to full-time coaching, but especially to leave Georgia to do it. What was your initial reaction when you saw the news?
I guess boom. I mean, I think my initial reaction was defense the problem at Texas? Like I didn't realize that was where they needed to make the biggest changes. But I mean, I don't think it's an all in move is what people are talking about. I think it's more of I mean, we have to change something. We still are underachieving under Steve Sarkisian. So you make a change, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I don't know the numbers. I don't think we have the numbers yet, but I would imagine that they spent a pretty penny to get Will Muschamp out of basically retirement and spending time with his kids, because that was what we were all talking about when, Georgia celebrated a national championship and Will Muschamp's kind of moving into this little advisor role where he just basically comes in on Thursday, watches film, and goes and hangs out with his kids. It was a great gig. I mean, you get it if you can. So to get him to not do that anymore, that number is probably going to be high. I would imagine it's probably going to be the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football would be my guess. It's the kind of money that he just looks at and goes, you know what? I'll get back into it. I still, it tells you that he still has that hunger. He couldn't get away from the game. But I'll be interested to see how it turns out for Texas. They did seem like they were doing kind of a bend but don't break defense. They won't have to worry about that kind of defense under Will Muschamp.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of what I wanted to say. The biggest thing I think I kind of take for granted, when I look at Kirby, I always think, well, Will was older than him. He was at Georgia first as a player, but Will's still only 54. When you consider the coaching world and how long these guys coach, if he wanted to coach another decade, he could, and it would not be abnormal. And you hit on the biggest thing. I think Texas made him a Godfather offer. I think they said, look, what do you want? And we'll pay you, and we'll talk to his family. And Again, I think a big piece of this, he's been at Texas before. He was very successful at Texas. He was the head coach in waiting behind Mac Brown. The Florida job opens and he takes it, and I think that was the right decision. That was one of those jobs you just can't turn down, especially as an SEC guy. So I am fascinated because I'm with you too. I don't know that the Texas defense, it didn't feel like to me needed a big overhaul, but clearly Steve Sarkisian wanted to go get somebody and let them run the defense in 2026 and beyond, and to try to be a little bit more hands off with how things go on defense. I did want to play this clip of Kirby talking about Will Muschamp. I asked him about the move on Monday. Was he aware at all that Will was looking to get back into coaching full time? This is what Kirby had to say.
So happy for him. He loves coaching. He loved coaching when he was here. It was hard for him to step away, and he felt like he needed to. And I had so much respect for him. And shoot, he helped us replace him with the guys we got, and he helped us tremendously in that role. He helped us tremendously this year throughout the year, and he's been really good to me personally, and he's been great to Georgia, and he's been really good to a lot of players that he's recruited. So when he had an opportunity to jump back in, I know he loves it. I think he missed it dearly. He talked to his family about it, his wife and his boys, and they all support him. And he's going to a great place to work for a great man. And there's not many better opportunities out there to go coach and play than a place like Texas, where you got a lot of infrastructure in place to help you. So wish him nothing but the best.
I think the biggest thing that struck me there, Kip, one, not surprised to hear him say such positive things about Will Muschamp. We all know how close they are and that admiration they've had now for 3 decades. But I think it came across very clearly how highly Kirby thinks of Steve Sarkisian. And I think it came out, in around that Texas game, that they text back and forth a good bit, that they have a good relationship, Kirby and Steve Sarkisian. But any thoughts, anything you took from what Kirby had to say there?
Yeah, I mean, he basically thanking him for what he did for Georgia. I mean, I think the fact that every single week or anytime someone has a big play against Georgia in a game, you can go to the junkyard and someone's bringing up like, we need we need Will Muschamp back. Like, and you know what, Glenn Schumann, we're talking about the job he's done over the last half of this season with a young group, but it still says a lot about the impact Will Muschamp had, and especially during the back-to-back championship run, where you can't really devalue his help in the film room. He is one of the great defensive minds in college football, and played a huge role in why Kirby Smart is able to show everyone those trophies. And I just think that he knows the impact he had, and he knows that it's just a different journey. Everyone's like, why wouldn't he just stay at Georgia then? And I think that's not really how it always works out. Sometimes numbers, sometimes the fact that Will is a very strong presence in a room. And having him and Kirby and Glenn Schumann, that's three people who know a lot about defensive football, and sometimes that could be too many, because you think you have the answer and your answer is right, and you have three guys butting heads. And that is kind of the reason why probably Steve Sarkisian is bringing him in, is because they need leadership in that program. They need that kind of presence in the locker room. And so, yeah, I think Kirby's just respecting the fact that one of his best friends gets another chance, and the fact that thanking him for the help he had. He spent time at Georgia. It worked out really well, and now he's got a chance to go somewhere else. It's just college football, and it's not like the door isn't open for him to come back if Glenn Schumann gets another job. Who knows? But that's probably why you say something like that, because you never know who you might be able to hire down the road a year or 2 years from now.
Yeah, someone on YouTube said Coach Boom is hell. And I will say this, just keep an eye out. Let's see if there's any kind of fallout from Will Muschamp leaving. That might wind up affecting the Georgia coaching staff in other ways. So that'll be something to watch the next few weeks. All right, Georgia men's basketball minute. Another big win for the Georgia Bulldogs, 103-74 over West Georgia on Monday. Georgia now 11-1. They've had 6 games now this season where they've scored over 100 points, which is a new program record. Have just one non-conference game to go. That is against Long Island next Monday night. Successful run through non-conference play. Wanted to shout out, man, Santos Surreal. 6 of 6 from the field in each of his past 3 games. He was fantastic against West Georgia. Wound up with 15 points, 15 rebounds. Big part of them pulling away in the second half. Georgia did a much better job on the glass and really being able to control and out rebound West Georgia to pull away when it was about a 5-point game early in the second half, and then Georgia took control. Shout out Blue Kane, had a great game, as did Jeremiah Wilkinson. Kipp, any thoughts on where this team is? 11-1, one non-conference game to go. Anything you like at this point? Anything you still want to see before we're talking about SEC play?
Yeah, I mean, that 3-point shooting is still going to be what makes or breaks them. They've gotten better. They've gotten better on the defensive boards as well. Those are still kind of the 2 points where it's like if you have those tough stretches in conference play, you're playing this non-conference schedule. It's like it's outside the top 200. Okay, so I know that the averaging 100 points, being the highest scoring team. I mean, it's better than the alternative, right? You're giving these guys offensive confidence, and you've been ranked back-to-back weeks and back-to-back years. These are still things to be celebrated, and I think, I mean, you are probably right around where you wanted to be right now. I don't think we really know enough about this basketball team yet, but I mean, credit to Mike White. You got him rolling. You got him playing your brand of basketball. And also, that North Carolina home and home, that's pretty fun. I was excited to hear that because, I mean, that's a blue blood. Like you can't get a better, non-conference matchup than that, in my opinion. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And also, shout out to Josh Brooks for that extension. This is a big reason why, because Mike White's done pretty well for you so far. That is a success story so far. And I think, being on a contract through 2031 is probably something worth celebrating. You got one of the better athletic directors, one that we thought for a while, it's like, oh, is he going to head to LSU? And he stomped that out real early. This feels like that's kind of the reward for that. But I think overall it's a strong start for the basketball program. Well, let's check back a month from now and see how it's going, because the conference still looks pretty strong so far. But I like, especially when you said what Santos Real has provided so far, that's exactly what they're going to need in conference play.
100%. Did want to say with Josh Brooks, like you said, him getting the extension, great hire with Mike White, Wes Johnson. I mean, the track and field team's been really good with coaches he's hired, so that is well earned. And yeah, it's going to be a long one, Kip, but I'm really tempted next year when they play at North Carolina. Georgia, North Carolina on a Friday night, and then the Missouri football game is the next day. So it may be a sleepless weekend, but that might be one I can't pass up. And I'm with you with the basketball team. We're going to learn, and I think it starts on January 3rd when they host Auburn. If they're able to win that game, even if they play it tight, with what I think is a pretty good Auburn team, the teams that have beaten Auburn this year are really good. That gives me a better sense of where this Georgia team is. But like I mentioned, they have one non-conference game left. That is next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. They will host Long Island, Brooklyn. I'll be down in New Orleans, but my plan is to watch that game and to have a story and to see what's going on there. So we'll get ready to end this episode. Just kind of a programming note. We will have another episode on Wednesday. That's our end of year awards that we do every year, pre-recorded, but that'll be ready for you guys. So if you got any travel these next few days, I would encourage you to listen to that. Later on Saturday and Sunday, we'll have a chance to talk to both coordinators for Georgia, talk to some players. I believe that will be both days. And on Saturday, we'll have a chance to watch a little bit of practice. So hoping to see something other than yoga, because I'm not real sure. Kip, they actually got to see some stuff last year, but I think I got a sneaking suspicion Kirby's not going to let that happen again.
No, I'm still shocked. I even got to see what I saw, in Athens last year. So yeah, you're going to get a great look at some jogging and stretching. I think maybe a position drill. Maybe you'll see a couple guys running through the bags a little bit, but yeah, and I don't know if you're going to learn anything about depth charts or see a lot of the actual base defense or offense out there.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of trying to identify early enrollees who, just in case you weren't clear, will not be able to play in this playoff, but it's always nice to see who's on hand and who's doing what. Ben and I will be in New Orleans next week. We'll have at least one podcast. I'm hoping we'll have a couple. Hopefully, have Neil McCready back on to help us preview another Georgia Ole Miss game. So just stay tuned for that. But we'll have a ton of content. I have no doubt about that as we get ready for the Sugar Bowl. So we'll end the episode right there. I will say thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is watching or listening to it after the fact. Go subscribe to dogs247.com. That helps us a ton. Like I said, a lot of great content with football still going through the playoff now. Men's basketball getting ready for SEC play. Won't be long. We're talking about Georgia baseball. We just mentioned Wes Johnson. Olivia Sayers got that handled for us, and she does a fantastic job. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dogcast wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review. It helps us a ton. Subscribe to the YouTube Dogs 24/7. Subscribe to the TikTok as well. Lots of great content there. We'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.